My name's Sasha Pete, and I'm joined by a fantastic individual. This man was a great for both St. George and the Socceroos. None other than the great Jim Fraser, goalkeeper extraordinaire. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much.
So tell us, Jim, how did you fall in love with our great game?
I was taken down to Hurlston Park Soccer Club in Sydney when I was 9 years old. And it was a funny situation down there because in those days, coaches weren't coaches. They were just fathers with cars. It was just not long after the war. If you had a car, you had a kid in the team, you were a coach. They couldn't take me to the game. It was an away game and there wasn't enough room in the cars that day. So they just took the bare team. I was left behind and the secretary treasurer of the club, Bill Brackenbury, he threw me a ball. He said, go and have a kick behind the goals. And I caught it. And he said, I'm going to make you a goalkeeper. And that was me in goals for the rest of my life.
So that first interaction by not being taken in the car. And
couldn't get in the car. And I was just lucky on that day. And I threw the ball. He must have been happy with the way I caught it. He said, I'm going to make a goalkeeper of you. And the way I went.
So 9 years old. And so how long did you stay at that junior club?
All my junior. And I still go back there now and coach. We had a reunion from that 1958 team about 2 years ago, and we got 9 of us there.
Oh, great.
Fantastic club to be with. And it's still the same as a community family club. Like we had all the goalkeepers there. We trained under a light that was about 30 metres from the ground, a street light. And where the goals were on a Thursday night. And even from the age of 10, the senior keepers all let me get in goals and they looked after it. They're like our big brothers. It was just a great club to be with. And it's still the same. It's still a good community club.
And so when you were playing on the street with your mates, did you ever try and venture out of goal, or were you always the designated goalkeeper?
No. I tried to do a bit of everything. And I actually played a few second grade goals for on the field. But, you know, I was a bit of a hacker. Not so good.
And so you progressed throughout the years there. At what point did you leave that junior club?
I left at 18, but we had a good grounding there because in those days we used to play club football on a Saturday and then we play representative on a Sunday.
Okay.
And the Canterbury senior club that had Johnny Watkins, Johnny Warren, Brian Smith, Ronnie Corrie in it, when we were 12 years old, they took 8 of us in and we actually trained with all those guys.
Oh, how good would that be?
Oh, it was good. And 3 of us went on to play in the national team, Bunny Curran, Dennis Yeager and myself.
Yeah.
And the rest of them all ended up playing first grade at one stage or another. So it was a pretty innovative move at the time, 1962, 63. And here's where you've got all these kids running around. And we were ball boys on a Saturday. And then later on, I ended up, being rooming with Johnny Watkins and playing with Johnny Warren at St. George.
Oh, how good's that? Yeah. So, and how much older were they than you?
About 7 or 8 years.
Okay, all right.
They were actually playing first grade at that time.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So and you played there until you said you were 17 or 18 years of age.
18, I went to South Sydney, Croatia for 2 years. And I couldn't get a game in first grade because Ronnie Corrie was the incumbent goalkeeper. And I mean, he was just at the top of his game. I couldn't get a game. So I left there and went to Polonia and ended up in the national team as his reserve. So I was number 2 to him. He still calls me number 2 now. But I was very fortunate because Ronnie took me under his wing at Canterbury. So he's been my coach, my mate and my mentor since 1962. He said, I remember him saying as we were training at Arlington Oval one night, and I was only a kid, he said, we're going to play in the national team together. And we did. We ended up being roommates together. So it was a pretty nice story.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so who were some of those the players in that Croatian side?
Jimmy Sandbrook was there. Tommy Stedden was there. Ronnie Giles, Ronnie Corrie, of course, and Jack Curry, who was formerly with Canterbury before that. So when they came into that division, they boosted the players, and a lot of the players from Canterbury, both juniors and the seniors, went over to them. So it was a Croatian club with a lot of Canterbury players in it at that time. Yeah, but it was a strong club and very strong competition at that time too. Games, a lot of big games.
So did you play in the twos or how so you're 17, 18, did you just train with the first team or did they have a separate team?
Trained in the reserve, played in the reserves. So I was in the reserves and on the bench. I only ever played one game in the first grade, and Ronnie was injured at the time, and the team was getting beat 5 or 6-0 on a regular basis. And I kept on saying to my dad, "I'm ready to play. I'm ready to play." And he's saying, "No." But I got my chance, and I did play. But we copped 9. That was my first grade game.
Yeah, so barrage of fire.
Yeah, it was, but it's an interesting story because when we came off, the goalkeeper at the other end was Frank Haffey. And Frank Haffey played with Cara at the time, and he was St George at the time, and but he played with Scotland when England beat them by 9 goals. So he said to me after the match, he grabbed me as I come off the field, and you can imagine I'm 17, 18, and I'm pretty upset. And he said to me, "Come here, son, I want to talk to you." He said, "How many people are here?" And I said, "I don't know, 3,000. He said, "I played in front of 100,000 people and let 9 goals in." He said, "I had my car burnt. They virtually hounded me out of Scotland." They used to tell jokes about him, what time was it, 9:30, all that sort of thing. And he said, "You got potential." He said, "You've got to let this get behind you." He said, "Nobody will remember this in 12 months' time but you." The irony of it was 2 years later, St George brought me to replace him. So, but he kept me in the game at that time because I was, it was a really nice gesture on his part.
Yeah, a great story and probably a lesson of how to turn the page for younger players. So how did that move go to St George? Because you played there for a number of years. So what transpired? So we're talking around circa 1970. Is that
70? Yeah. I went to St George. Frank Carrick brought me. Went to St George. Played there for until Raleigh Rassick came along, and Raleigh didn't want me. He said I was too small, so he wanted Jack Riley, and so I'd injured my hand. So he actually sold me to Canterbury for $300.
Okay,
which was a bit of an insult. And I actually reminded him of it. We were at a function a while ago, and there was quite a lot of people there, and he was up, what Raleigh's like. He's up and he's talking, and I was beside him. He said, "Oh, Jimmy did this and Jimmy did that." So I took the microphone off him. I said, "If I say good, Raleigh, why'd you sell me for $300? And he said to me, "We made good money. We sold you by the kilo. Now shut up and listen." Yeah, quite a funny story. But so I was at St George, Canterbury for a year, and then Raleigh left, and Frank Carrick brought me straight back from Canterbury. So I came straight back and had the rest of my time at St George.
What was the transfer fee back?
I don't think I had to pay anything at the time. I think that it might have been part of the deal that I went back for nothing. I don't know, but it's $300 was not much money at the time.
Yeah. And so you mentioned two great Socceroo coaches there. Describe the personality differences between Frank and Raleigh. Both strong personalities, obviously.
Huge, different people. Both. Look, I believe from a Sydney point of view, they brought professional football to Sydney soccer, if not Australian soccer. We went from training 2 nights a week to training 4 nights a week with Frank. All our uniforms laid out, everything was organised. We had our first time where there was constructive coaching, if you like, to the point they did it. And then, of course, Raleigh was the same. Frank was really well organised all the time. Everything he did was organised, and so was Raleigh. Raleigh was different in as much as he was very instructive on the day. At halftime, his halftime talks were, he could pick up what was going wrong and get you organised for the second half. Frank was more organised for the week ahead, but both very good coaches, and both knew how to get the best out of players.
Motivators, yeah. Would you say you've got both motivational?
Yeah, and it was a big transfer of coaching ideas at that time, because I'd been under Joe Blassett's in the national team before that.
Yep.
And Uncle Joe was a guy. If he put his hand on your shoulder and said, "Jimmy, I need you to do a job tonight," you'd die for him. But he wasn't as well versed in the tactics, because things were changing in those days. So we went from that to Frank and then to rally. And it was just a huge jump at that time.
So Jimmy, you would experience that colonial Australian coaching versus this European influence.
Oh, absolutely.
And these European, you just mentioned Joe Vlasic, Frank Garrock, Rally Rasic, that European continental football. Describe to me that shift from, let's say, that Scottish, Irish, English heritage of Australian football to this continental European style.
Yeah.
How did that change?
Yeah, look, I was, the first time I noticed it, we were at Croatia, and we had Michael Kiss was the coach, and Michael was well organised too. He was very efficient with what he done. That was a bit of a shift from what we were normally used to, where it just wasn't as organised, and it was all about getting on and doing your thing and motivation, and the training was pretty archaic, and there was no, I mean, we didn't even warm up in those days. It was pretty ordinary, and then all of a sudden Michael Kiss comes in, he gets organised, and then Rally took it a step further, Frank a step further again. It was one of those situations where it was just when you're going from the playground to the university. Big difference.
And you think about those communist countries in the sort of the 50s and 60s. I mean, they just dominated Europe because the influence of the government in the football sides. You think of Russia's, Yugoslavia, Hungary, all those communist countries really invested heavily in their national pride footballing sides, and so obviously the best sort of ideas filtered through, and we benefited from that. So St. George is obviously doing very well in your time there. So describe to me the rivalries. Who did you feel that who you came up against? You said, today was going to be a tough match.
Well, Hako or Apia, Jugal was very strong. Croatia, all those teams were strong. There wasn't too many weak teams. Panhellenic was strong. It was, look, I played with one of the weaker teams before I went to St. George, was Polonia. Had a lot of Polish players. First year we did very well, but as they got older, the next year we slowed down a bit. But those European players, you learned so much from them. And every culture was different. Every ethnicity had a team. There was Dutch teams and Greek teams, Italian teams, Yugoslav, all of those teams. And there were some excellent players amongst them. The standard was really good. A lot slower than it is today. But the standard was excellent. There were so many good players in those days. So, yeah.
And you would find, I mean, people would be playing national team football and then coming to play here in
absolutely
in the first grade, second grade standard here in Australia.
Yeah, there was a lot of internationals from overseas came and played here. A lot of players that had played at the top over there in Europe and England, and then they came out. So the standard was very, very good.
Frank has been described often as eccentric. What are some of the eccentric things that he did in your team? Can you think of any stories?
Yeah, I can. Look, we had a bit of a problem at St. George when he came back the second time, and he felt there was something wrong with the club, and he couldn't put his finger on it. We all had individual meetings, and that didn't work. He took us to, I'll never forget the name I still remember the name of the restaurant, the Hunter's Lodge at King's Cross. So we all went to the Hunter's Cross, and we were quite surprised there was alcohol on the table. And of course, as soon as the boys had a few drink, all the truth started coming out, and he got the stories of what was wrong with the team, and he mended it. And that was his way. I don't know what it cost him on the night, but whatever it cost him, he sorted the problems out. So he's a very cunning guy. But look, he was eccentric. One of the funniest stories with Frank was we had a guy come in and wanted to do a presentation about stretching. And we never stretch. We just go out in the field and start pounding balls at one another. And this guy came in. There's no PowerPoints in those days. He had butcher's paper, but he had it all neatly written out what he wanted to talk about. He was talking about dynamic stretching and ballistic stretching. And I was sitting there and thought, gee, this is really interesting. This could be really good. And the guy was really enthusiastic. He did this great presentation. At the end, he said to Frank, what do you think? And Frank said, no, it won't work. And he was really dismissive. And I thought, this poor guy, he's done with all this problem. And the guy said, well, what's the problem? And Frank said, listen, my dog lies outside of my front gate. Every time a car goes past, he chases it, comes back, lies down, chase the next one. He says he does it 100 times a day. He never stretches and he's never pulled a muscle.
Great story. So talk to me about throughout your career. Did you play representative football? I mean, obviously you ended up playing for the Socceroos, but was there regional sides or state sides?
Absolutely.
But talk to me about your first time playing regional, a regional side or a state side.
Well, the first time we went to, we played against New Zealand as an under-14 team before Everton. That was our New South Wales team. And I think the same year was about 1964, we went to Queensland to play in the state championships, and we went by steam train. It took us 16-hour, great trip. Still remember it really well. And then we actually flew to New Caledonia with that state team.
Okay.
Played 3 games over there. Dennis Adrican was the coach. Frank Parsons was a manager. And that was my introduction to representative football. And then, of course, later on, we played a lot of the English and European teams used to come out here, and we played against them as New South Wales teams. So I was lucky I got to play against Banks when he was playing with Stoke, and Yashin with Russian Dynamo within a month.
Oh, wow.
I played against the 2 best goalkeepers in the world, within a month. Which was
I mean, like, describe his stature and how he played, because he's like on video, he was so commanding in the box.
Yashin?
Yeah, Yashin. Yeah.
He was a huge man. He was so big. I've got big hands. I take a size 11 glove, so I got big hands. And this guy, I mean, I felt I was a baby, and when I shook hands with him,
Okay.
Big, powerful man. He was obviously starting to get to the end of his career a little bit then. But he was, and actually we drew 3-3 with them. They beat us 2-1, and then we drew 3-3 with them on the Wednesday night. But I was, look, to be fair, I was completely intimidated just going up to him and shaking hands with him and Banks after the match.
Yeah.
And it was funny because with Banks, I was really worried about what I was going to say, because I'd had Yashin first, and I was so shy when I went up to him, and then Banks is this big name, and I think, I wasn't worried about how I'm going to play. I'm worried about what I'm going to say to this guy after the match. and just about 5 minutes before the end of the match, Jeff Hurst volleyed the ball, and it was one of those ones. I went the right way, got a touch, put it over the bar. And Banks actually put his hand on my shoulder after the match, and he said, "That's one of the best saves I've seen." So I said, "I'm a bit disappointed, Gordon. I usually catch them." And he just laughed. He said, "Yeah, right." It was a moment between goalkeepers because he could see the funny side of what I said.
So what would you say? I mean, Yashin was so commanding.
Yeah.
I'd see reels of him playing, and in the box he would just dominate, and almost have these spider hands, just go out and grab the ball. I remember once seeing a clip of being able to, he went out there and just the ball came and caught it in one hand. That to me was very unusual. Most keepers go with 2 or parry, but he would be able to just go and catch it with one hand. What would you describe Banks's style like?
Banks was a lot more mobile, I think. More mobile, made some great acrobatic saves. And I think Yashin just positioned himself so well. His positional play was so well. And look, he was one of the things that I was impressed with, and I actually copied what he did. He was calling back and playing out with his feet from the back. And we didn't do that in those days. I started to do it. And the good thing, when I was at St George, it was really easy because we had so many good ball players at the team. Every time I got a ball at my feet, I had 6 people screaming for it, and they could all play. So I had all these options. So, I knew that no matter where I played it, they were going to be able to take the ball and move it, like Dougie Ucicenovic and Bobby Hogg and Willie Hamilton, those guys, Johnny Stoddart, great ball players, Johnny Warren. You could play a ball to them, and they just move with it all the time. So there was a lot of quick transitions. That was one of our things that we did very well at St George. We played out from the back, quick transitions, and turned people around quick.
You talk about playing with your feet. When I watch the reels, how often would you, like the ball player, and you collect it in your hands to slow down play in that side versus trying to move the ball on quickly?
That was one of the things that Arock was really keen on, and he got me to do quickly. Was he always looked for that quick transition? So I mean, and he said to me, you've got to slow the game down when it suits us. So we need a breather, slow it down. And we need to reorganise, slow it down. But if there's something on, play it quickly. So that was one of the things that he did. So, but we didn't touch the ball as much with our feet in those days. But I used to quite a bit because of the way we played. But we'd take the pressure off, so they could play back to me. I'd play out.
And even the kicking style has changed now. Like the goalkeepers will try and kick the ball side on versus we do that more traditional. When you were playing more that punt size. So how did you find that you would want to kick it in the middle or go to the sides? Where would you try and aim if you wanted to send the ball long?
Usually to the sides. We always found that up the centre was a bit of a lottery ball because there was more people up there, more defenders there. So we tried to play to the sides. But the old balls are a lot harder to kick than the new ones.
Yes, the weight,
they get wet, and just the construction of the ball was completely different. So if a goalkeeper could kick the halfway from those days from a goal kick, that was a big kick.
Yes,
whereas you get 14-year-old kids can do it now.
Yes, just the weight of the ball, I suppose. The actual
and the older balls, the newer balls are easy to catch. We didn't play with gloves most of the time. The gloves that they had now, so we play in bare hands. I can still catch a ball better with my bare hands than I can with gloves. But the reason I wear gloves is because the kids spit on their gloves all the time. You don't spit on your hands when from the ball. So it was completely different. And those old balls, when they got wet, they weighed a lot. Very heavy, so much harder to handle.
And the absorption of the water, I suppose, into the leather of the ball. Yeah,
that's right.
So. What about the fearlessness of the goalkeepers? Do you think that that's changed over time, or do you think that that's been equally brave players coming out, going head first to hands first, head first to the ball on a one-on-one?
Look, the problem with that is that because the game's got so quick, if you come up one-on-one and the player goes over the top, you've got a penalty against you. So, excuse me, you've got to pick your time when you do that. There's more of a blocked situation where you get out and you try to block the ball. I mean, still go at feet if you can. If there's a bad touch, you can go at feet, you go at feet. But you talk about fearless. When I first started playing, if the goalkeeper caught the ball in their hands and they still had it in their hands and a player hit you in the back of the net, it was a goal. So you go up for a high ball and player would hit you. And I mean, they used to line you up, especially when I first started playing first grade. And I always remember playing against Darpia, and one of their players, Phil Battaligo, great captain, a great man, really nice guy, but tough, And he hit me one day, and it was in the rules. It was a fair charge. But I remember lying on the ground. I thought I'd been hit by a steam train,
Wow.
And he said, "Welcome to first grade, Sonny."
Would you find that you'd have some of your big defenders try and help you out next time round? Would they line players up?
Yeah. Look, everybody evened everybody up in those days, and you didn't see players going down whinging and crying and all the time. Yes. It was a badge of honour. You got up and you got on with it. And if somebody hit you, and it was a fair tackle, you got up and that was it.
It's almost strange. Like now, hopefully, we're coming closer to back to that, but like when you played football, if you went down, you better have had your leg broken, because to stay down, it was a decline in your masculinity, right? So if a player hit you and you were down, it meant that he had the better of you, so you got back up regardless of how damaged you were.
It was a badge of honor. Get up and get on with it.
Yeah, I suppose it would only be 10 or 20 years later where people going down and screaming and crying like ballerinas.
If it's interesting, because if you look at how much actual time the ball's in play now, 90 minutes, it's not a lot of time, because there's so many people going down. It just drives me crazy. And the other thing that really gets under my skin, every time a ball goes to a goalkeeper now, doesn't matter whether there's anybody within 10 metres, they dive forward onto the ground and wait for 4 or 5 seconds before they get up. Now, when I first started playing, you had to bounce the ball every 4 steps. But if you kept on doing that, they couldn't stop the game. So they got rid of that rule to speed the game up. Now we've gotten back, and you're supposed to get rid of the ball in 6 seconds. And all these kids are lying around the ground because they see the other players doing it, the first grade players doing it. Drives me crazy. I tell the kids, you do that, I'm going to take you off.
We're going back to representative football. So, do you remember the first camp that you got called up into for the Socceroos?
Absolutely, I do.
So, walk me through what year it was and how you were called up.
1969, I've been playing with Polonia, and I'd had a good season. And they came back from Vietnam, and Billy Rourke was getting married at that time, and so they were a goalkeeper short to go to Mozambique to play against Rhodesia, and then on to Tel Aviv to play against Israel. So in those days, we finished in about September, and you didn't start training till March. So nobody was fit in the off season. We just went and played cricket, dinner, whatever we want to do, and played tennis or whatever. So they rang me, and it was in December, and they said, look, are you fit? And I said, yeah, of course I am. So they said, well, come in and we'll do a fitness test tomorrow. And if you're fit, you go into Mozambique. So beautiful, but I wasn't fit. I wasn't going to admit that, but I wasn't fit. So we went to Wentworth Park, and there was a lot of guys that I'd played against at that time, but I didn't know very well. But fortunately, Ronnie Corrie was one of the guys. So we started running around the oval, and it was a really hot day on a Saturday morning at Wentworth Park in town. And
so what month is this?
December.
December, okay.
Yeah, so it's hot. And we started running, and after about 4 laps, I started to lag. So Ronnie Corrie grabbed one arm, and Stan Ackley, who I'd only played against, didn't know well at that time, he grabbed the other, and they said, if you stop running, we're going to punch the hell out of you. And they hid me in the middle of the group and took me around. So I got into the team with those guys virtually hiding the fact that I wasn't fit.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that was the sort of thing that happened in those days. They stuck together, those guys.
Yeah.
Somebody came into the team, and that's what carried it. See, people don't realise that 1970 World Cup team, we only missed out by 1 goal in getting in.
Mm.
We got beat 1-0 in Israel, and then came back and drew 1-1 in Sydney. So by 1 goal we missed out. Israel went and we missed out. So
yeah, that was at the Sydney Cricket Ground, right? The
second game was at the old sports ground.
Sports ground, okay.
Yeah, which was next door.
Okay. And so I remember seeing a small documentary on that campaign. Israel were a good team as well, so they weren't shabby. And we're talking about 16 teams, so it's effectively like making the semi-final. That's the other thing that people don't understand, that today when you make a World Cup, it's double the amount of teams.
32 teams. Whereas when we qualified in 74, 16 teams, that was a big deal. Big deal. Ronnie Corrie, incidentally, when we were in Israel, made the best 2 saves I've ever seen in my life. The penalty against us, and the ball went down low on the right, and Ronnie got a touch to it and hit the upright. And I thought it had hit the upright because it came back so quick, but he got a hand to it. But he got up, and the guy that took the penalty, I can't remember his name now, but it came through and he smashed it in the top corner. And Ronnie got up and touched it round the just unbelievable 2 saves, within a second of one another.
And so you went off to did you say Mozambique? Is that
we couldn't play Rhodesia at home because of the political situation,
apartheid or whatever? Yeah.
So we played 3 games. We drew the first 2, and then beat them in the third one. And so we got to Israel late because we'd had to play the third game. We were very tired, long flight. In those days, they used to book flights, and you'd wait 10 hours at the airport because they wanted the cheapest fares, all that sort of stuff. So we're at a big disadvantage. And then I think 4 of the boys, the team went down with flu. So we had 4 players out. But they had a very good team, Israel. They were decent.
Intimidating playing up in Tel Aviv?
It was. Look, it's intimidating everywhere you go. I mean, every time you go somewhere, it's people don't realise you go overseas. They're not nice to you. we treat people nicely. Like when Scotland come out here, and in the summer they come from their winter. We played them in Melbourne. We should have played them in Darwin.
Oh, you're talking about in '85.
We're too nice to people when they come out here. Whereas you go overseas, they'll do anything to make you in Iran. It was horrific over there with the intimidation at the airport when we arrived, and the car trying to run the bus off the road. And
you're talking about now the 74 campaign.
Yeah, 74. You know, people, they're not nice to you. It's after the game's different situation.
Yeah.
But before the game, they'll do anything to win.
And describe to me that lead up into that 74 campaign. So the first, let's start with the camp. So where did you go? What did you do? 74,
we used to try to go to Wahroonga, the Fox and Hounds. I know it was a restaurant, the Wahroonga Motel, I think it was that called. And that was our base always in Sydney. And it was just a home away from home because we'd been there so often. And like we didn't have buses to go to. We had to use our private cars to get to the grounds and back and all that sort of stuff. It was it was midway between, getting organised and being professional and not, but it was a big step up from the 70 campaign. And Rally was very organised. It was the first time we'd had proper information about other teams from overseas, who was doing what and what style they played. He had a lot of contacts, Rally. Very organised. And those camps they were sensational. We had a lot of good people in there, and that team bonded very well. I mean, I would have talked in the last week to 7 of the 74 team.
Yeah, you guys are all still close, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Peter Wilson dropped in to see me the other day. And Nighty Maxie Tolson, Rally, I spoke to Rally yesterday. It's very, George Harris last week, we had coffee dinner. They're all just close guys. They're good guys. And that's what carried us through that sort of friendship. Yeah, good.
So that campaign is one of the most extraordinary, the way in which we qualified for that, for those games. To walk us through so we've got first Iran there, and then here in Australia, and then we're off. So walk us through winding back. You touched on how intimidating they are in Tehran. I think it's like 80 or 90,000 people. Is it?
Well, there's varying reports from 110 to 130.
Okay.
Right. So, but we actually played a tournament in Sydney. It's a lead up to that where Iraq played, Singapore, New Zealand, and there was one other. But we played a round robin there. We won that, and then we went on to Iran was the next stop. They were expected to win, but we beat them 3-0 in Sydney.
Yes. Yeah, great.
That was a big shock to them.
Okay.
We really played well that day. It was good, and big crowd at the old sports ground. That was packed. So that was a good result. Went to Iran, and there was people at the airport demonstrating against their team and ours, their team for losing. But they targeted me because of that. And everywhere I went, they put 4 fingers up and said 4 goals, Fraser, 4 goals. So that was, and I was thinking, how can I turn that round? And Rally had this guy in talking to us about cybernetics and that's all the psychological input that we'd never had before either. And so I thought to myself, well, I've got to turn this around and make a positive. But in the old days, we had a paper called the Soccer World, and they used to rate you from 1 to 5.
Okay.
So 1 was a poor game, 2 was a bad game, 2 was a better game, 3 you'd played well, and 4 that was good. You were good. And at 5, nobody got a 5, very rarely. So every time they put their hands up, I was thinking 4 points, 4 points, 4 points. I'm playing well, I'm playing. So they actually, I reversed it so that they psyched me into playing well. But we went to the game there. They tried to run us off the road with a car on the road, and that was a bit of a stage thing. When we got to the ground, Rally insisted we walk through the crowd instead of going straight under. He said, you've got to get used to this before we go out. And it was just unbelievable. All the people went crazy.
Yep.
There was a moat around the ground. There were soldiers with submachine guns. I mean, everything they could do to intimidate you.
Yeah.
No women allowed in the ground.
Yeah.
So it was all men. You couldn't hear yourself.
Okay.
3,000 feet above sea level. So I was never a big kicker of the ball. Like Ronnie Corrie was a big kicker of the ball. He'd go penalty area to penalty area. And I could do that over there. Ray Bart's nearly tore the net down. I mean, the ball just moved so quick.
Is that because of the sea level? So
yeah, when it's 3,000 feet above sea level, the ball moves. People don't realise when you go overseas, you face all those things.
Wow.
Yeah, you go to Johannesburg. When we were there before, that's above sea level too, and it's harder to breathe. It's harder to breathe. So it's very awkward. It makes it a lot harder. So we played the game, and in those days it was on aggregate. So if they score 3 goals, there's a replay then, and we were 2-0 down in the first 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So Jelic Carney hit a ball from just on the penalty spot with his left foot, and I just nearly tore the net down. I think I dived after the ball went. I just couldn't. It was that quick, and then they got a penalty, and then we held out. For probably 65, 70 minutes. It was unbelievable, and everybody just ran and worked so hard. And there was things going on the park that were little acts of bravery that you could see that, you think, oh, geez, how'd they do that or whatever. Maxie Tolson came on for Adrian Ellison in the second half and hit the goalkeeper and nearly knocked him through the back of the net and intimidated him, and that the goalkeeper hung onto the post for the rest of the match. He was a bit worried about coming off, and it was a fair hit. It was one of those things. But
what a tough player, Maxie Tolson.
Tough. Yeah, even Peter Wilson used to come up on corners. I always remember when they say, we're going to smack it, Pop. And he knew it was coming, and they did as hard as they could. But it was funny because the next day he'd be on the plane having a laugh about it. He played in the club, and then the next day he'd be going away somewhere. So there was a few funny stories come out of that with in Iran. Peter Wilson, with about 2 minutes to go, and there was a break in play. Somebody got injured, and it was Ray Richards got hit in the head with something, and he was down injured, and the crowd was going ballistic. And I'm thinking, I'm at the wrong end of the ground here. We're going to have to get out of here quick. And it was really intimidating. And I looked over, and Big Willie standing there, bouncing the ball, singing. And he could have been in his front garden. He just didn't care. I thought, that's really cool, Pete. You just don't care, mate, Johnny Watkins probably had the best game I've ever seen anybody play for Australia that night. He was just box to box, and he was marking people running. And there was one funny incident where he tracked one of the players, and the players kept on playing wall passes to other players, and he made this great run. And he released the ball and got it back about 4 times on the way through, with Johnny closing him down. And he got about maybe 10 or 15 metres out. And he's hit this ball down low on the left, and I've dived and got a touch to it. And Watkins just looked at me and said, how many more bloody corners are you going to give away? He said, you ever catch the ball? So there was that sort of humour in the.
Okay.
But the interesting thing to me in that match, and I've told this story before, so before the match, we lined up for the national anthem, and it's the first time I looked down the line, and it was the first time I've seen our players really worried.
Okay.
We're in problems here. I really felt we're in problems. And they played the national anthem, looked down the end of the line again, everybody's up, ready to go. It was just that, it could have been in the movie. It was just one of those magic moments where you're sort of just blessed to be part of it, because the national anthem meant so much to the boys, and that was the trigger. And I knew then we were going to qualify. We're going to get through that next round.
Okay. Yeah. And so then we go and play Korea. So was it after, I'm pretty sure after Iran, did we go play
South Korea, but we played at home.
Yeah, so it was ended up going. So walk me through those 3 games, because that culminated, arguably, I think, in the greatest goal ever scored by a Socceroo. So that last goal in that 3rd game to put us through, I think, for me, the greatest goal scored. So obviously before my time, before I was born, but just thinking back, that a beautiful hit, and I think it needs to be celebrated a lot more.
Yeah, look, I think you're right, but there was just one thing happened before we went to South Korea that's really important. The difference in style, we were talking about the difference in style of coaches before. In 1970, when we got back from, or 69, when we got back from Israel, they said, we got back on, I think on the Wednesday, and they said, hey, we can't afford to put you in the hotel. You've got to go home and then come in on the Saturday, which was crazy because we'd been in camp together, and why would you do that? So they let us go home. Uncle Joe was a coach. Uncle Joe was the most lovely bloke you ever met in your life. But he bowed to what was happening, whereas that Rally would have said, no, I'll put him in a hotel, I'll pay the bill, and embarrassed them into doing it, you know. So the difference was when we went to Iran, after the match, the South Korean officials there were the FIFA officials, and the rule at the time apparently was if there was a draw after 2 matches, they had to replay the third match within a set time, 3 or 4 days, maybe, or whatever it was. The Koreans asked for it to be a week or 10 days. Our officials agreed to it. Rally broke into the meeting, walked into the meeting, and he shouldn't have been there. And he walked in, he said, no, you can't do this. He'd been tipped off by somebody else that had happened. And he actually made them change it. He said to the officials, are you crazy? The reason they wanted to do that is they can't recover as quick as we are, as we could. So we drew the 2 games against Korea. We played them within that short period later, and that was the difference between the 2 teams. We recovered quick.
I remember other people talking about that plane trip going across. Was it into Hong Kong?
Yes.
So, and you guys were on the same plane.
Same plane. They were very quiet.
Quiet. And you guys were up and about?
Oh, yeah, we're running muck. We were running the muck. We always did. It didn't matter what happened. That team was just so funny, and it didn't matter what happened. When we went into the airport in Korea, they halted us at customs, and they went through all our bags and all the usual stuff to hold you up. And I think we drove them crazy because we were just having such a good time laughing and carrying on. We obviously weren't worried about it, but they were very quiet on the way back when they because they'd expected to win both games. And they had that good player up front, Chabum, that went on and played in the Bundesliga. He was the first player, and he was very successful over there. So they had a decent team.
He was very quick, very quick.
Incredible. But see,
who was marking him? Did he play out wide or up?
No, what happened there, that was Manfred Schaefer was marking him.
Yeah.
And Johnny Watkins had that great game in Iran, and Rally dropped him. And I went to Rally, I said, boss, what are you doing? I said, that was incredible. And he said, yeah, he said, he's taller. And he said, they're 2 big boys. He said, they'll get penalties against John because he's tall and looked like him fouling him. He said, we'll put Manfred. And Manfred was a great man marker. I mean, he was a policeman. Yep. Put him on somebody and he marked him out of the game. But I mentioned before that they had Rally gave us information, and this Charbon always turned to the left and peeled off players that way. And I nailed him outside the penalty area 3 times because I used to play up high, but I knew he'd turn left each time. So I was able to do this. And the first time I tackled him with the ball, he did it because he thought I would be back on the goal line. And but that's the sort of information we got from Rally that we never got before.
So this is we talk about like coaching detail to the level of detail.
Absolutely.
Which way the play would turn on which side. That's absolutely.
Yeah. And in those times, we never got that sort. And now, I mean, with the video analysis, I've just been away with the Philippines women's team, and Alan Stajic and Noel Arate, the coaches, and the detail they go into, the games are actually won off the field. I mean, that team, with what they've done to take that to the next level with a bunch of kids that never played before, and they're all of a sudden in the World Cup and up the rankings. And I'm just looking at the detailed video stuff they do. I think, oh my God, where are we going with this? But of course, that was never available in those days.
Yes. The interesting you touch on that development into what you guys have done with that women's national team. How many spots have you risen up the ranks? So you've been you and Alan have been there for a little bit over 12 months now?
No, Alan and Alan are the brains behind it. I was just doing the goalkeepers.
Okay, all right. So what's Alan?
They've taken them up about 20 spots. I mean, they played 25 internationals. I mean, that's unheard of. And they come third in the cup in Vietnam, and then we won the Asian Cup about 2 months later against Vietnam and Thailand. Those two, but look, it's so advanced now. I had to go down and say, Alan, I can't keep up with the video analysis. The IT stuff, I just can't keep up with. I said, I can look at a video, analyze it, and fix what's wrong. Not a problem. But I said, I can't keep. They'll do things like they'll say, pull up all the in-swinging corners from the left side, and you've got to have that all locked. I can't do that. So I've got them to get somebody else in to do that.
Okay, to actually do the coding or whatever to bring it up. Okay,
I can't do it. It's beyond me. I mean, like, I'm back in the stone and chisel days.
So walk me through. We're talking about that third game in Hong Kong against the Koreans.
Yes.
And roughly what minute is this when the ball sort of bounces out for the goal to be scored? Just explain to me that
75, 80 minutes, I think, round about that stage. There was about 10 or 15 minutes to go.
Yep.
And Ricky floated a free kick over. Jimmy Rooney laid it off, and Jimmy, of course, just smacked it. And it was a decent goal.
Yeah.
And look, we knew we had the upper hand.
Okay.
We had the upper hand, and look, they shocked us pretty much in the second game because they were 2-1 up at half time, and there was 30,000 people at the game, but it was dead quiet. They didn't celebrate goals, nothing, and it was really eerie. There'd been a bad mix-up between Dougie Eccentricities and I for the first goal. That Dougie and I are still arguing over whose fault it was. There was hail on the ground when we went on. I moved to the side to get a ball passed back to me. Dougie put it to the centre, and the shot was on, and I got a touch to it, and it went, and then they scored two. So we were 2-0 down. Bulovic scored 2-1.
Oh, what a player. So Branko Bujovic.
Yeah, there were some great players in that team. I mean,
yeah,
Rooney, Bart's a great player. Tolson, if you go to Big Willie at the back and Dougie Eccentricities, Cole Curran, all those guys, are just and players to back them up. Georgie Harris and all those boys, great team all round. There wasn't too many players who weren't good players in that team. And you had players like Billy Wojtek missed out. I mean, there were some decent players missed out, some good players around in those days. So we were strong all round the pipe. But we got back to 2-2 and then held on, and that was hard. Those three games were probably, and the Iran games were the hardest games I played in ever.
Okay, yeah, just the intensity.
Intensity and the fact that as a goalkeeper, there's so much on responsibility on your World Cup. When you make a mistake, you're out. And that goal that was in the first goal in Hong Kong, whether it was Dougie's fault or my fault, it was a goal, and I had to wear it. But you've got to pick yourself up and put yourself straight back on and get it behind you. You've made your mistake, get on with it. So that psychological area is a big part of what we do, but nobody had explained it to us. We talk about it now, explain it, and there's a lot of stress involved. And, you're nervous before the game. And, I always remember the first game I played, we were playing against a World Cup game, was against Iraq. And it was in a game where if we got beat, we were going to get knocked out. And I got up for breakfast and get nervous, and I spilt the sugar, spilt the milk, and the waitress said to me, "A bit nervous about the game today?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "What position do you play?" I said, "Goalkeeper." She said, "God help us."
If you're spilling the milk, how are you going to catch a ball? That's brilliant. From the waitress.
Yeah.
How many goalkeepers did Raleigh take into camp for that? Let's say for the Koreans. For the games with the Koreans?
There was Jimmy Milisanis and Ronnie Corey and myself.
Okay. So Riley didn't make that.
He came back after it. I pulled out.
Yep.
For the finals, and he came back in then.
Okay. So you touch on that. You were running a business at the time.
Yeah.
So
I had a security business. We had about 150 people working.
Yeah.
Times were tough. Every time I went away, the business lost money. I had a partner, and my wife used to cop the flack of me not being there. And we got to a stage where if I went, we were going to lose some big contracts, and a lot of people were going to lose their jobs. And my partner said he'd sue me if I went, and he ended up. I didn't go, and he sued me anyway. Ended up having losing the house anyway. So it was a decision I made at the time, and I've regretted it ever since.
Okay.
But at the time it seemed like the right decision to do. And we're only part timers. I mean, it was there was no money in it for us.
Yes.
But it wasn't about money. I mean, it was. But to pull out of something like that, to be fair, we didn't realise what we'd done at the time.
Yes. Okay.
We just didn't realise how big football was in that situation.
Yeah, because we're in Australia where football at the time is not even the exposure, television, etc. Papers. You pull up the papers. We would buy our own unique paper to get the football information.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, but obviously, in Europe and in like places like Korea or Iran, games of
huge,
the number one sport, and you'd almost feel that when you travelled, you felt how big the game was, obviously compared to playing in Australia.
Look, it was funny because in Australia we used to get such good crowds that you thought it was big, but we didn't get the publicity.
Okay.
The ethnics, they're all hard workers, and they go and work hard through the week, and that was their week. If they didn't have a lot of money, they go, and that was their football on the weekend, was their outlet.
Yeah.
So, Arlington Oval, Wentworth Park, Marconi, Lambert Park, they were all packed on the weekend. So
you'd get 15,000, 20,000
absolutely
on a weekly basis. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, on the weekend they play 5 games, and then one on the Sunday, and over the weekend they get more than they get at A-League games now.
Yes.
With a third of the population of Sydney.
Yes. So you make no money playing for Australia. Obviously wouldn't even be petrol money, right?
That's
for the representative games that you played. So you played very much for honour. And that decision time. And you're saying that your partner still sued you after the fact?
Yeah, we went to court and he beat me.
Wow. What, because of on what basis? Of the fact that you were.
Well, the basis was I virtually mismanaged the business because I wasn't there when I was required to be there.
Okay. And you said you lost out financially because of that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So how important it is to pick the right partner, right, in business?
Oh no, look, he was a businessman. He wasn't a football man. I mean, he thought he was losing money. He thought he had a right to do it. I don't hold it against him. At the time, it was pretty devastating. But when you look back on it, he put money into a business. We built it on my expertise in the security business, and then it all fell apart because of. At one stage, Raleigh showed me a telegram they got that we used to hire guard dogs out to factories, and we used to train them properly. I mean, they were well trained. And Raleigh got a telegram before the match in, I think it was Korea, where they said it was addressed to me: guard dogs locked in factory can't gain entry. Please advise. I'm in Korea, and the guy hadn't turned up to put them away, right? So, and they didn't show me that till after the match, but I mean, that was the sort of thing that was happening.
Mm. You touched on this, the friendship between that the boys that played the lead up to the 74, and then afterwards you hold this camaraderie where you guys try and sync up every now and then. Talk to me about what that meant to you in your life throughout football.
Oh, look, people often say you're lucky if you got one good friend. I've got so many good friends, and they're unique. I mean, Harry Williams and I used to room together all the time. And we still talk on a regular basis. And, it's just that sort of thing carries on the field. I think it's something that's missing from football now. Somebody said to me, I was in a conference a while ago and I was a guest speaker, and they said, what's the big difference with the players now? And I said, well, I don't think they're as close because they're on their earphones all the time and they're on the phone. It drives me crazy. They're walking down the field to go to train. They're on the phone. I said, don't do that. Let me see you on the phone. You come here, you switch on, and you're ready to go. I don't want to see you on your phone. But it's a way of life, and we can't change that. That's part of what they do. We've got to adapt to that. But I think it affects them on the field. They're not mates off the field because of these phones. So they can't carry it on the field, whereas we're all just mates. Like, spend the time, we talk, we'd be with each other, we'd sing on the bus. They don't sing on the bus. They put their earpods in and away they go. That's their thing, and times have changed. But I really think it affects them on the field. I don't think I don't think they're going to be mates in 50 years' time. Like Ronnie Corey and I have been friends for 62 years.
Yeah.
You know, long time. We talk 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Alan Marr, same. We talk 3 or 4 times a week. You know, it's one of those things. Harry and I talk on a regular basis.
Harry Williams and yourself.
Yeah. You know, and he was crazy. And he said he was doing an interview once, and they said, "Who's your roommate?" He told them me, and they said, "Oh, you get on well with Jim?" He said, "No." He said, "I don't like him. The only reason I have him in the room with me is because he can spell and I like crosswords." And Harry think nothing on the morning. Like you'd be on, I remember we were wrong and we're playing Iran the next day, and he woke me. I'd been in this, and it's always hard to get to sleep before the night before a match. And he shook my shoulder. He said, Jim. I said, "What's the trouble, Harry?" He said, "What's a 5-letter word?" I said, "Oh, God."
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So after the World Cup, how much longer after that 74 World Cup did you continue on playing?
I got injured the next year. I got a kick in the shoulder and knocked the rotor off. So okay. I virtually played the whole of the season with an arm I could hardly move, and it still affects me now. They couldn't operate it on those days, so I was finished. By the time I was 26, I was gone. So I started coaching straight away, virtually.
Okay, and walk me through some of the side. You just said that you were there, part of the women's national campaign at the Philippines, but walk me through some of the other clubs that you've coached at.
Sydney Olympic, Apia. I've been to Blacktown City. I've done Marconi, of course, been to Marconi. Most in the old NSL and Parramatta Power, Sydney FC. I'm at West Sydney Wanderers now. I do all the development sides from 13s through to 20s. I love that development area. That's great for me now, and I really enjoy that. So most of the bigger clubs that over the years, I've been around a while.
And have you done both? I mean, obviously you focus now on the goalkeeping side, but have you had head coaching roles as well?
Yeah, I was head coach of the Philippines Olympic team and under 19s as well, and that was interesting. It was the first time I'd done a national team as a head coach.
Yep.
Developing country, very tough. Not a lot of money at that time, but great people, great culture. I really enjoyed that. It's one of those, and people don't look. I've always been usually an assistant coach. I've coached in state league as a head coach, but that step up to the national level, that's a huge step up, and to do that, and that was tough, but it was very, very enjoyable.
And when you go from, let's say, levels, let's say through the state league, let's say first grade, national level, what do you think the differences are in the quality of the coaches that coach at that level?
Look, I think the big problem is now with the coaching, you've got a lot of coaches who are able, like I've got an A license, I can't get a pro license because I'm not computer literate enough to do it. But I see coaches that have got those levels, they've got no understanding of the game, right? But it's not derogatory. They're good luck to them, but sometimes you look and you think they don't understand the game. How can they coach it? We've all got different ideas, and I think a lot of time there's a lot of over coaching now. You know, let's keep it simple. Stadge is brilliant at that. He keeps things simple. He makes sure the players understand exactly what they're doing. He can stop a meeting and say, "Do you understand what I said?" "Yes, I understand." "Well, what do you expect? What do you expect?" And everybody knows what to do, right? I think sometimes the information that's given to players, my God, I'm in dressing sheds at halftime. Sometimes I think, how can they understand and take all that information in? Because
Too much
overload. A typical example, we played in against North Korea with the Philippines team, and I had a boy as a natural number 10, and he said before the match, he panicked. He's coming to me, he said, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? You haven't given me any information. I said, just go and play your games, son. I said, you're a natural number 10. Just go and play. He said, but I usually get. I said, don't worry what you usually get. Just go and do what I asked you to do. Came off after. He said, I've never enjoyed a game so much in my life. He said, usually I get so much information, I get confused. But I see that happen a lot. And I think that's gets back to coaches who are inexperienced. But, you know, there's this overload. And I read an article the other day that the young coach had written, and you know, I looked at it and I thought, if you took all the superlatives out of it and the acronyms, there's nothing left. You know, it's just babble.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a simple game. You know, everybody comes up with all these new terms, and everything's got new terms to it. Yeah. Just keep it simple. Get on with it.
So, Jimmy, you're in that sort of development phase and at an A-League club. So you've got a number of kids that have got the talent to then go out and play, you know, at a decent level and the highest level in this country. So you're now coaching that 17, 18, 19-year-old boy or girl. And they're looking to make that transition of playing against other young adults, boys or girls, and now playing against men. What's your advice to them?
Look, I think the big thing is you need to play a lot. You need to understand the game. You need to be in a situation where it's not all highs, or there's plenty of lows in football. There's plenty of good times. There's plenty of bad times. Goalkeeping, for instance, sometimes you'll stand in the post and your shoulders are rubbing against the uprights. That's how you feel. And other times it's a big lonely place because things don't go right. And you've got to persevere. But you've got to get your basics right. And you've got to have a good all-round game. You can't go out if you're a goalkeeper and have no left foot. You can't. And goalkeepers especially, they're inclined to practice what they're good at. If they're good on high balls, that's what they, because it makes it. But you can't have weaknesses. You've got to have a good all-round game. Sometimes it's a bit boring doing it. My job is to prepare them to get, so like by 15 or 16, I want them training up with the NPL boys if they're good enough. Right? So I've got to prepare them to go at that transition in. So, you know, it's a matter of me shaping their character as well as giving them the basic fundamentals to train and give them a good understanding of the games and getting them to be brave enough to make decisions in games. So you'll get situations where last year I had a goalkeeper who played in the game and came out for a high ball, dropped it, and it cost him a goal, and that goal actually cost him the match. And the coach abused me afterwards, and he said to me, you know, your goalkeeper cost the match. And I said, well, your strikers didn't do too great up the other end. And I said, did you see any good in what he did? He said, he came out and dropped the ball. I said, yeah. I said, he made a great decision to come forward. He was brave enough to back himself. And I said, when he came, he dropped it. I said, I'd rather coach the drop ball than not making the decision.
That's it. Yeah. So the indecision of goalkeepers is often what costs you the goal.
Absolutely. So my thing is, go out and back yourself. And if you drop the ball, I'll back you. You're not going to get dropped out of the game for making a mistake if you do that, right? And they've got to test their boundaries. And if they don't test their boundaries, so the coaches have got to back them on that sort of thing. But you've got to give them the tools to make sure that they can do it as well. So they've got to be fit enough, fast enough, and strong enough, and have the confidence to do it. You know, I mentioned stress before. My favourite quote of all time was from Chilavert, the South American goalkeeper, and he was being questioned before a match. He's been interviewed, and I thought, everything this guy's saying, oh, it's a big thing being a goalkeeper, and, you know, it's a lot of stress, World Cup, and I'm thinking, yeah, and I'm thinking, you've got to be there to understand that. If you don't, and Chilavert went, no, it's not stressful. And I thought, what? Not stressful? Are you kidding? And the guy said to him, what do you mean it's not stressful? He said, stress is when you get up in the morning and you don't know whether you can feed your children. And I thought, that puts it into perspective. It's a game,
Mm.
right? And you've got to cop your lumps. If you make a mistake, you've got to cop your lumps. And sometimes it's not obvious. You get a ball that takes a deflection, bad bounce or whatever. Maybe not your fault, but from the sideline, it looks like it is. It's a tough game. Tough decision.
Fantastic words of wisdom, Jim Fraser. Thank you so much for your continued contribution to Australian football. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Okay, Sasha, thank you very much for having me.
Hey guys, we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our wonderful guest. If you like this type of content and would like to see more, how about you hit the like and subscribe button? And have a fantastic day.